This podcast is brought to you in partnership with Speak Studios, presented by Delish Hamburgers. Speak Studios is a community-driven studio space where voices from all walks of life can speak and be heard. You can find them on Instagram and Facebook at Speak Studios and at their website, speakpodcasting.com. Speak Studios. Speak and be heard.
Welcome to Building Better Businesses. I'm Kristen Dees, founder of Catalyst Consulting, an agency that helps small businesses and entrepreneurs start, grow, and level up their businesses. This podcast will bring you interviews with experts in all things business related. Have questions for a business attorney? We've got answers. How about your health insurance? Got you covered there too. New episodes coming your way every week. Find us on the podcasting platform of your choice. Thanks for joining me on today's episode of Building Better Businesses with Catalyst Consulting. My guest today is Brittany Ratelle. Did I say that right?
You did.
Excellent. Coming to us via the internet. So I'm pretty excited to have her here. She is a business attorney, and I know lots of us probably have lots of questions. So we'll kind of kick it off. So tell us a little bit about you, the human being, Brittany.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me here. So, Kristen, I appreciate it. So my name is Brittany Ratelle, and my tagline is I am an attorney, but I'm a cool attorney because attorneys kind of get a bad rap sometimes, and for probably good reason, in terms of not being very approachable, of not being relatable, of seeing kind of scary or putting themselves kind of behind a big paywall in terms of the access of their information and their expertise, especially in dealing with people. So that's not me. I'm a mama of four. I used to be kind of an exclusive nap time attorney when I was first in practicing and building my business. I did it when I had my littles at home because, and so I've always just practiced for myself because then I could have the ultimate flexibility. And there were great things about that. And there were hard things, including me, trying to reach a litigation deadline when I used to do family law, and I would literally have like a nursing baby and I'm typing out the other thing and I'm trying to make stuff work. But I love my gig now because I shifted my practice a few years ago as I kept on seeing more and more friends start to build businesses and turn things like mommy blogs into more mini lifestyle media companies, or people turn Etsy shops into, maker and artisan and craft businesses. Or people who had a penchant for writing or for speaking, turn those into other, quote unquote, real businesses. And there was a huge gap in terms of their needs of legal. And, they were, they didn't want to go to their father's attorney, and it wasn't relatable. And he didn't know anything about the Instagram or how to sell and what it meant to be kind of a modern entrepreneur trying to navigate social media, e-commerce. How do you do giveaways? What about contracts? What is it like if you have a VA that's out of state? Like, all of that looks like that's so common now for a lot of business owners who are navigating this cool time where we have really lower barriers to entry in terms of people starting a business. You probably don't have to have and invest in a commercial lease somewhere or to get a truck or even a space, especially if you have an e-commerce based business. And so it's easier. So you don't have to have a business plan, but then with that also comes some questions that there may not be someone forcing you to sit down and go through some of the more traditional business steps in terms of getting your foundation in order. So that's what I do. But otherwise personally, I love to hang out with my kids. We like to ski. We live in Coeur d'Alene and in the Northwest. And so that's a big part of what we do. We like to play on the water on the lake in the summer, and we ski in the winter, and hang out with my hunky husband, who's 6.5 feet tall. And who takes up a lot of space in my bed, in my life, in all the places. But we have a good time together.
Very cool. So share a fun fact about you, something that maybe not everybody knows.
I'm a huge Lord of the Rings nerd.
Ooh,
so
okay.
I read the books growing up and then got really into it in college. It kind of dovetailed with the launch of the whole Lord of the Rings universe. So I saw Return of the King, which was the last in the trilogy, 13 times in the theaters. So,
nice.
I was there with my roommates, like midnight showing with the cardboard cutouts, first in line. And we looked behind us and saw just a sea of guys, of nerds behind us. And then we were like the lone females at the front, I think some of them hadn't really seen a girl in a while. But it was, but it's a fun, fantasy favorite of mine. And I like to read fantasy as well for fun. So yeah, love Lord of the Rings. And now I've got my kids quoting some beginning Elvish. And I feel like that's kind of one of my greatest contributions to my parenting. So
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. You got to pass some stuff along, you know?
yeah.
What character do you feel like you relate the most with?
Oh, I mean, I love the Hobbits. I mean, they're penchant for breakfast and second breakfast and 11sies and all of that. You know, I feel like I'm raising a lot of Hobbits because their food needs are constant and ever going. So I feel like there's always a lot of love in my life for the Hobbits. Yeah.
That's pretty fun. Yes, all the eating is wonderful. I love snacks. That's always my number one priority when I'm going traveling somewhere. I'm like, I need to bring snacks with me. So
yeah. What's the snack setup, and do we need to be? And do we need to have a preemptive eat just to make sure?
Yeah.
My husband's been known to do that. He'll always be like, wait, who are we going out with? Because he's always concerned that he's not going to get enough food, and so he's been known to pregame it just to make sure he doesn't get hangry, and then everyone has a better time.
That's funny. That's good though. I mean, it's nice to know those things about yourself. Like, okay, pre-gaming for him is like making sure that there's food in his tummy, not like getting drunk first.
Yeah, no, he just has to make sure he's got some protein.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on this a little bit, but what are some other ways that you kind of provide support? I know you've got some like packs, like templates that people can get from you too. Like,
yeah,
that's a cool
so
thing.
I kind of help people in two ways. You know, more traditional lawyering, and I see almost all my clients virtually because I work from home and I do intellectual property law and some other business transaction areas. So I have clients actually in all 50 states. I mean, all over the country. I don't know if I've touched all the states, but I serve people all over the country. And then for some people though, they maybe don't need one-on-one legal services. That's maybe outside their price point or where they are in terms of kind of just in their business and the evolution of their business. And so I also have digital resources. So I have templates that have kind of education and training that go along with them to kind of teach you, hey, if you're just hiring a freelancer and want to know, am I supposed to have something in writing? You need one of these. Get an independent contractor agreement. And, and here's your little video to teach you what all these things mean in here and your big decisions that you need to be making in terms of how you're going to pay them, how are we going to handle intellectual property rights, which are kind of the big two issues that come up again and again that you really want to clarify whenever you're hiring a freelancer in your business.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I've actually hired some freelancers and I've been a freelancer before too. So
right, on both sides of it. So, and then on the other side, I'll have like a client service agreement, which is like, so if you're a graphic designer and you're, hiring out and you do client one-on-one services and you're like, I probably need to have a contract, or I maybe got something from a professor or a friend, or I got something in a Facebook group, but does it have everything I need to have in there? And I like the one that's from it's the AIGA. It's like it's kind of the guild in terms of graphic designers, but it's really long and pretty legalese. So I use that and base that from one that I've used with multiple designing clients of mine. And then now I have like my own client service agreement. So all of that is in Creative Contracts is the name of that shop that sells all those templates. And so those aren't official legal advice. That's just a template. It's kind of like Legalzoom, but more narrowed and curated for people who are running kind of a modern creative business is who I'm trying to serve. So
nice. Yeah, that's really cool too. Cause I mean, I've used Legalzoom for stuff before. And it's overwhelming almost because it's like so general and you're like, I feel like there's other things that I'm supposed to worry about that aren't in here. So it's nice to have that. Have you used a resource for that? So
yeah, and then you also don't know what's in it, because that's the thing is my goal always with any of my resources and the educating I do on Instagram and on my podcast is that I want people to know more at the end than they did at the beginning. If all they did is get a legal form and send it to somebody and they don't know what's in it, I don't really feel like that's serving the relationship and really helping people move forward and avoid the kind of conflict that then turns into legal trouble. Because we want to make sure that we have a good, fair deal, that people have clear expectations of what are we agreeing on here. And that comes with knowing what you're signing and knowing what the terms mean. So.
Are you still there?
Yes.
Oh, there you go. Sorry, you kind of cut out at the end, but I think we're good because we tested it and it seems like the audio will still record it individually on your side. So I just missed the last part. So I think we're good. But okay. So tell us a little bit about your background. How did you end up where you are now? You kind of did talk about that too at the beginning, but you said family law. Now you're here.
Yeah. So I graduated law school. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I was kind of open to kind of having my path being navigated by higher power and trying to be thoughtful and intentional. Especially I really wanted to be a mom and stay-at-home mom, and so that was kind of my priority for the first few years. But then I found myself being pulled in this direction of that there was a real gap. And, I kept on having friends who would, some of them were kind of like bloggers and would get, a bigger deal from, maybe a big brand. Like, oh, I have a deal with Kroger or Target and I just got this contract. Can you read this over? I know you don't really do this. And I'd be like, yeah, I don't really do this, but I'll sure. Like, because I know she's going to sign it. Like, you're just not having any idea what it is. And then finally, when my last baby was born 4 years ago, I kind of realized, this is actually exactly what I want to do, is want to help people like this. And so I really made sure that I dug deep and understood more about the world of licensing and influencer marketing, and how I could make sure that I can provide help in terms of intellectual property and the intersection of kind of privacy, internet, social media, intellectual property, and startup law. So
very cool. Yeah, I always think that's the fun part, is like how you get to hear all the other little things that happened along the way and kind of led your path and your journey. So
totally. Yeah. And I was grateful that I had, some clients from early in the beginning who started kind of, having larger social media followings. And so that's where I got my first business, in terms of, because they trusted me with their work than other people did. And so, a lot of how people find me now is, through social media or word of mouth, which is always my highest aim, is that I want someone to have a good enough experience working with me that they'd recommend me to a friend or someone in their mastermind or in their coaching group or something else. So,
yeah, no, that's definitely a dream. So this was just a random question for me because I've always wanted to know. And if you Google it, you get all kinds of answers. But is there a practical difference between an attorney and a lawyer, or is it the same thing?
It's actually the same thing. So they are used interchangeably, although I will say in the UK, there is a difference between barrister and solicitor. So the names do actually mean something different, because they kind of have two tiers of legal practices in terms of who can do what. And one's fancier, and wears like the more formal stuff you see like in Bridget Jones' Diary than the other. But that's not how it works in the US. It's all the same. And really everyone graduates from law school. People ask me all the time, like, well, what's your specialty? Or did you study that? And like, law school is kind of just law school. It's not like medical school where you really have like a residency or a fellowship, or usually like you have a specialty. That's pretty rare. Like maybe you took some classes in that, or you intern in the summer, but everyone graduates with just a law degree. And most attorneys aren't quite sure what they're going to practice in, or if maybe they think, and then they go into practice and they're like, oh, that's terrible. I'm like locked in a windowless room, just reading with like a highlighter. Like, I don't want to do that forever. And so it's a lot of, playing around with stuff of what do you want to practice in. And then as attorneys progress in their career, they usually tend to specialize more and more, just like doctors do as well, and then you have people who they're a heart surgeon, they work on their podiatrist, and you don't use one for the other. They're not interchangeable. So.
No, that makes it. That's actually really interesting. I thought differently. Like, I thought it was almost more like a doctor type thing, where you're like specifically going into like intellectual law or family law or something like that as part of your schooling.
Right.
But yeah, no, it's almost more like kind of like a lot of the conversations I have with business owners in general is you just kind of like figure stuff out and you're like, well, that was terrible. I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, a lot of law school is it's theoretical and it's case law. And honestly, it's a lot of reading about railroad accidents from the 1800s. And so, if that sounds like a good time to you, you should go to law school. Because you're going to really dig it. And so, because a lot of it's looking at case law, and law school teaches you how to think like a lawyer. It teaches you critical reasoning skills. That's its whole purpose. It doesn't actually teach you the practice of law. You're expected to learn that on the job or for yourself. Or now, luckily, we have Google and we have podcasts and you have online courses and stuff to teach you about what does it mean practically to practice in a certain area, and how do you file things, and how do you actually redline a memo, and how do you deal with other attorneys, and all these other hidden rules and manuals that come with actually being a lawyer and working in legal services.
Which makes sense too, because I mean, my perception, from TV is that internships are a very big part of becoming a lawyer too. So that makes sense from that perspective too. Like if they're doing that to get some real life experience and interact with other attorneys and learn how to do things and hopefully test some of those things out. And they're like, well, I don't want to do that. Like you said, windowless room and a highlighter. Some people love that.
Yeah, people I love that. And that's a lot of what being an associate and being a grunt at especially a larger law firm looks like, is like, you just get handed work. You don't get a say in what you do. You just get told, I need you to do this. And you kind of maybe are very discreet type of a task that you do, and it may be over and over again in terms of reviewing this kind of contract. So that wasn't at all interesting to me, and so I kind of forged my own path in terms of I really like having control over who my clients are. I really like having control over my schedule, and so I've tried to build my business and my practice around that so that it could serve me and serve the people that I really want to be working with. So
very cool. Good job. I like that. So what different types of business-specific attorney specialties are available for business owners to work with?
Totally. That's a great question. So I would say the main ones are probably someone who does startup law. And now a lot of people who say startup law, they really mean more of like a Silicon Valley, like a larger startup that's like going to get bought out or get like series funding, like venture capital or angel investors or something like else. But I think a startup law could also characterize as like any kind of small business law. So, and that's all called transactional, like it's under this big umbrella of transactional law. Transactional law means we're dealing with deals and transactions and contracts. We are planning on that we're not going to court. If you have to go to court, you are under the litigation umbrella. And so most attorneys do one or the other. Most don't span both. And so I do transactional law, like a lot of other people who do business law. And so kind of startup law, small business law, other people would kind of say, and that would be like helping you form your LLC, your entity, helping you with maybe your initial contracts that you want to have in terms of maybe helping with your lease, helping with manufacturing, helping with other vendors, other employers or contractors, and getting all those relationships all settled and smoothed out. That would kind of all be under like business or startup law. There's also intellectual property, which I also practice in. This is dealing with copyrights and trademarks and patents. I don't do patents. Patent in its own lane of law, and those are for like super nerds of people who did some sort of science as an undergrad. It's actually required. Oh. You have to have either a science undergrad degree or like practical experience, like you were in an engineer or something else, which you probably also have a degree in it. And then you decided to go past the patent bar. It's a separate test. It's even from the regular bar. And so I don't do patents, but I've got some names of people who need patent work. Yeah. But I do trademarks and copyrights, and those protect your stuff in your business, your intellectual property. So this protects your books and your ebooks and your online courses and your artwork and your brand name and your logo and all of that stuff. That can all be protected by intellectual property. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
And then like there's, mergers and acquisitions, which, or M&A is what it's called for short, that's buying and selling of businesses and how those fit together and how those pieces come apart and how we work out deals in between partners, if they're doing that inside of a partnership or outside, if like someone's selling their whole business to someone else. And I also do some work there, for smaller businesses. So, yeah.
Okay. The patent thing, I was like, what? Like, I guess that makes sense because it's inventing things essentially. So there's going to be some other stuff involved.
Yeah. And a lot of it is very technical, especially in the niche. There are people who just specialize in like tech and software, and there are people who do it for medical devices and, other people who help with, formulas, whatever, in terms of like skincare or beauty care or what else, or pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, like there are, people who usually specialize in kind of lanes in terms of patent law and stuff. There's an employment law attorneys too who practice there, who either work for the people who have been maybe wronged in the employees, or they help kind of in small business owners advise on kind of employer and HR matters. And some of that's kind of a hybrid, kind of an HR/employee law role. So, yeah. And then there's tax law too, which is lovely and which I don't do. And that's the same in that, like, that kind of overlaps with what CPAs do as well. So they don't practice law, but tax attorneys also aren't accountants, but they come closer and closer in a Venn diagram in terms of advising on similar issues, And normally tax attorneys are advising about larger, more nuanced and complex tax dealings with the business. So if you just want to know, hey, what do I owe for my quarterly taxes? You don't need a tax attorney. You need an accountant. You need a CPA to help you with that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was actually going to ask that, like, what's really the difference? Cause I know for me too, I'm like, do I need a CPA? Like, I need a CPA obviously, but right. I'm like, do I also need a tax attorney? Like, what is the difference of
most CPAs law? Are going to be able to handle. Tax attorneys are dealing with like, oh, we have someone who's joining this company and they're bringing in assets that we're capitalizing over different schedules. Like it's more advanced usually needs of that. So, And now I'm not a CPA, but I will kind of get big picture and say, well, here's my advice, or, here's what I would talk to, and make sure that you're talking to someone, an accountant that's helping you. And there's also a bookkeeper, which is a different role. A bookkeeper is someone who's basically is just managing and getting all your books reconciled each month, is basically looking at what money is going out, transactions, what money is coming in. Do we know where that's going? And are we categorizing what type of expense that is, so that we can do our taxes? Because if you've, looked at your Schedule C for taxes before, there's categories that go on there. And it's nice to not have to do that all at the end of the year, and have it all at once. It can be sometimes a mess, especially if you realize, oh shoot, I had way more expenses than I thought, or I made more money than I thought. And, especially if you should be paying quarterly taxes, it's a bad surprise to get. And so a bookkeeper, some people hire that as a person. Some people just use software, is getting more and more popular these days, like QuickBooks or Bench or Xero or FreshBooks or whatnot. There are all different kind of options out there that can help you with your bookkeeping. And then you can also take that to your accountant and say, here is my thing for the year. Please help me do my taxes. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where I'm at. I have a bookkeeper. And also for me, like the other perspective of that is just managing your finances in your business too. Like you said, not waiting until the end of the year, but then also keeping track of what you're doing. Cash flow and
profit and loss statements and stuff.
Profit and loss. Yep. I'm obsessed with that.
Because it's an all too common problem in business, is in that, if you're not making money, that's usually a problem in business. You need to have money. But growing too quickly can also be a problem, in that, especially if you're in like a physical product or service where you're having to invest initially, and you're having to buy a lot of materials or labor or something else to get things going, or product. And then you're looking at your accounts and you're like, well, shoot, I'm not going to get paid on that for 50 or 30 or 90 days sometimes. That's a cash flow issue, because now you want to make sure that you have access to capital and credit, that you'll be okay, because you are making money, but you don't have all that money yet. And you need to be spending money to keep things moving forward so that you don't get stuck. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I have a strong background in operations management. And so that's one of those things that I just kind of learned super early on. I mean, I've been managing a P&L since I was 19, I think.
Right.
And so that was like one of the things that stressed me out at the beginning. I'm like, I just do not have time. So I'm like, I need to just have a bookkeeper manage this part for me. And then we just have a monthly check-in, and I look at it and I'm like, okay, all right, it's okay. I'm okay. But yeah, so it's super important. So, okay. When it comes to working with an attorney, what common misconceptions do you hear from your clients?
I think the biggest complaint that people have is that attorneys aren't, their communication skills, that they're not responsive. So, and I think this is a valid criticism for a lot of lawyers. So, and I will say that, I try to really try hard in my business that I don't fall into this camp, and that even if my response to someone is, I saw the email, I'll get back to you next week, at least let them know that, like, I saw it, even if it's quick, because I know that not hearing from someone, sometimes your mind, especially if you feel like you have a problem or a stressor, could start to kind of catastrophize and go to a place of like, oh, gosh, worst case scenario, what's going to happen? And there's no one there for me and whatnot. And so I can appreciate that perspective. I also know that sometimes, the answer is there's nothing to do right now. We're just waiting. I have to do a lot of kind of hand-holding when people move through the trademark process, and it's a long process. It takes usually between 8 to 12 months to get a trademark back. And so, I try to prepare clients and make sure that they understand that it is going to be a while, but, I get a fair amount of emails from people who are like, have you heard anything yet? And I'm like, nope, I promise I will let you know as soon as I know anything. And so, it's a delicate balancing act, but I try to always appreciate my client's perspective and make sure that I'm there to answer questions, because that's what they're paying me for, is for them, for me to be their advisor and in their back pocket and make sure that they can trust there. I would say the other kind of big complaint with attorneys is not feeling that they're transparent or that are predictable in terms of their fees and how they're getting paid. So, which probably comes because a lot of attorneys bill by the hour, and they do billable, and like an unknown legal meter, like a taxi cab fare in the background, is like the scariest thing imaginable to a small business owner. I get it. Yeah. So for me personally, I really try to do flat fee billing as much as possible in my business, to try to mitigate that. And so when I talk to a client and, they need some custom legal work, like they need some custom contracts or something else, we try to take a look at, and I always try to at least give a range, or, we'll put like a cap in terms of the project will not go over this amount, so that they can have some predictability, and then they can decide, okay, I am okay and I want to move forward with that. I can plan on that in my budget or not. So, because I don't want people to be in that place, and I don't like ever having, to give my clients surprise bills. That's a big part of why I practice like that. But not everyone does. And because not everyone is in a structure where they have the freedom to do that. A lot of people are under a lot of pressure at attorneys to bill, to say yes to any and all work that comes in, and just figure it out later of how you're going to manage your client load. And then what happens is people get put on the back burner and shifted around, and it's, you only answer the emails and work on the stuff of the squeaky wheel. And if you're not being squeaky, then your stuff doesn't get dealt with, which could be really, really frustrating for a small business owner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that kind of leads me to another question. So what should somebody look for if they're thinking about hiring an attorney for whatever it is? Like what are some things that they should know and to look for?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's good to make sure that there's a good, connection there. Is this someone that you like talking with, that you're going to like working with? Are they taking the time to really understand your business? Make sure that it's not too much of a I know what's best because I'm the expert here. You are paying someone for their knowledge and expertise in legal matters, but you're still the expert on your business, and what you've learned, what you know about your business partners or your vendors or your employees or your customers, and then where you want to go. And so if someone is not taking the time to understand that and really listen to you and make sure they're getting the full picture, I would keep on searching for somebody, because that should be a relationship that should hopefully be ongoing. And and maybe that means you have to pay a little bit more, but, if you treat it like a commodity, sometimes you get what you pay for. And, I would think that with something that you really care about, your business can sometimes feel like your baby. You should want to take care about it, and you want to make sure you're working with somebody that cares about it like you do.
Mm-hmm. So it would be a good idea to meet with multiple people before you decide then?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Meet with other people and see, what is their, do they have any experience with the issues and kind of the business that you're looking at? Have they ever worked with somebody who does what you do? Or it's not to say that, if they've never done your particular type of business, that they're going to be ill-equipped, but make sure that there's, whether it's a physical, product or service-based business or e-commerce or whatnot, or content creation, that person has some kind of experience with kind of the relevant issues, especially how things are relative to working online, to sales tax and what's changing there, and what the law is about, influencer disclosures and FTC and website legal policies and all kinds of stuff that are changing quickly. And you want to make sure someone is really doing their due diligence to be on the up and up. And that should be pretty obvious from talking about them and asking to just kind of some initial questions about their experience and who are their type of clients that they work with. So, yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. So let's see. I think we kind of talked about this already, but yeah, I'm going to skip it because we talked about, no, coming back. Okay. Because this was the thing, we were talking about LLCs and stuff earlier too. So I'm just trying to think of how to phrase it differently. Okay. We'll just do it and see what happens.
Okay.
So in working with the small businesses and entrepreneurs that you do, what are the most common things that people help you or ask you for help with? I think particularly in that like one-on-one type of relationship that you have.
Totally. So probably the most common question I get is, do I need an LLC? And if so, when? And I will say, I should have said it earlier as a proper attorney, but while I am an attorney licensed to practice in Idaho and in Utah, I'm not an attorney in this situation. This is just for informational purposes only, no attorney-client relationship. But typically what I talk to people is that, if you are making money in your business, specifically more than $600, the IRS considers you a business. And so if they consider you a business, that you're not a hobby, and this is something that you want to move forward with, I would probably incorporate or register as an LLC sooner rather than later. So, and sometimes I come at odds with accountants on the other side who are like, no, they don't need to incorporate yet. They're not making enough money. And I get their perspective because LLC doing the bookkeeping work for it and the accounting work for it is a little bit more complicated and it's a little bit more expensive. It's also more work for them. So maybe they're just trying to get out of more work, or maybe they're trying to watch their client's pocketbook, which I can also appreciate. But LLCs and filing for an LLC is really reasonable, especially here in Idaho and in Washington. And so the fees for it are not that bad. And then once you file for an LLC, which is a limited liability company, you get a fence in between your personal assets and your business assets, which means if someone was to come and there was going to be a lawsuit and there's going to be some sort of risk management or exposure to you, not everything would be on the table. There would be a bubble. And so, and like I explain this to some of my clients is like, on the Titanic, when the iceberg hit and they had those little engineer rooms where the walls would come down, once they started sensing water, they would, keep it down. And so one compartment could flood, but not the whole thing could flood. Eventually it did on the Titanic. But what we want for your business is if something starts flooding, if you get sued, we want it to just stay in that LLC. We want the walls to come down, and it can't touch other things. It can't touch other businesses. It can't touch what you share with a partner, what's in your 401k or your house or your car or your savings account. All of that is protected, and that's what a limited liability company does. If you haven't incorporated yet, then you're a sole proprietorship. That's your default. That's like your Times New Roman. If you open up a Word document, that's what you are before doing anything. That's what you are. And so some people make the mistake because they've registered and done online to be a sole proprietorship, or done like they're doing business as a DBA. And they're like, oh, but I'm already incorporated. I'm like, no, you're not, because I just looked it up in the LLC thing. So unless you have LLC in your name and you've gone through those steps on your state Secretary of State website, you're not an LLC. And it's the other secondary reason outside of kind of the Titanic flooding analogy is that I think it gets you in a really good habit of how to set up your business foundations. Because typically the order that I recommend my clients is that we set up your LLC. And I will also say that if you are working from home and virtually and you don't have a physical office space and you want to preserve your privacy, I also recommend that you set up a virtual mailbox first. Because what that will do is it will give you a real business street address that you can use for all your filings. And then you also sign up for a commercial registered agent service. So you pay $50 a year, and literally all these people do is if you got served, they would accept service or process on your behalf so that someone doesn't come to your house. Okay. You can't put a PO box or something like this. It won't work. The state websites will reject it. So you get those two set up, then you go and set up your LLC. After you get your LLC set up, you do your EIN, which is your tax ID number. It's your electronic identification number. It's basically like your social security number for your business. It's free. Please don't pay anybody online to set it up for you. It's completely free. It takes you 5 minutes. Once you have those two documents, your LLC, certificate of organization, and your EIN, you bring those together with you to the bank, and then you can set up a business bank account in the name of your business. And now you can do and have a separate place for all your business money to go in and all your business money to go out. And it's keeping your finances clean. It's keeping your nose clean. So if you have any IRS troubles or if you have any legal troubles, it's very easy to prove I'm running this as a business. This is all the money that could be on the table at most if you lost a lawsuit and had money in a judgment against you. So, and it's in the number one way that people undermine their own liability is by mixing money and commingling. We don't want to commingle unless it's on the dance floor. So don't commingle your assets of like your personal money and your business money. Don't go back and forth of like putting things on the your business card and being like, oh, this is for personal, and oh, this is my business card, and I'll remember to take it off. Like really try to keep those things separate and be, and have some discipline there, and then protect yourself. And then, like you said, you can then run a good profit and loss. You can understand where you are in your business. It can better inform your pricing and make sure if you want to make investments in terms of hiring or expanding or taking, on coaching or, going to that conference or whatnot, or getting that new equipment, where you stand and you can make better decisions for your business. But all of those, it really works to have those in that order. When you don't follow that order, it's a huge hassle to go back and have to change like your payment processing online because it's not in the name of your business, because you don't have your EIN, because you didn't set up your LLC, and on and on.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know that is a very confusing part, like the what do I do first thing. I get a lot of questions about that, and I know enough to be dangerous. But
right.
Like,
and so that's why I recommend, and it's not because like everyone's out to sue you and like they're going to get your shirt if you don't set up an LLC. No, probably not. A lot of businesses are not super risky, But like, is there ever going to be a great time? Is it ever going to be super convenient and easy and a fun thing to do? No. And no one is probably going to come tell you and remind you, hey, business owner, you're real, you need to start adulting and go set up your LLC. Also probably no. And so I would just do it earlier and sooner rather than later. And then you've got everything ready, and you're ready to grow, and you're ready to hire, and you're ready to do business with other people, and you look like a real business, and you're treating yourself like a real business. So
yeah, I feel like it kind of changed it. Like you said, treating yourself like a real business. It's like an adulting step, you're like, oh, I'm like the real deal. Like I have a debit card for my business.
Yeah, like, no, it's so funny, but like those things are real. Like there's some like real, I mean, you want to talk about like a business affirmation, like there's some swagger that comes from hitting those milestones that should be celebrated, and that kind of allow you to stand a little bit taller and make sure that like, no, I don't do discounts, and no, this is my pricing, and this is how I work with people, and this is what it looks like to become one of my clients or my customers, and all of that just come with that, that maturity and evolving as a business owner. And so, don't shortchange that journey, and make sure that you're stepping in there and that you're not intentionally playing small because you're afraid of putting yourself out there as a business owner. And that's what I see sometimes people saying is like, well, I don't want to file yet because I'm not ready. And I'm like, are you not ready to be a business owner, or are you not ready to like tell people that you're selling something? Like make sure that you're being, digging into yourself and doing your own mental work there of understanding what your real block is. If you really don't know what to do, or if it's just a little scary, and it's okay if it's scary, but name that fear and let it be in shotgun, not driving the car.
Yeah, exactly. That's good. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
I had a question when you were talking about the LLC. So on DBAs, the doing business as, right?
Right.
Do you have to file for that? Is that a legal thing? And is it related to the
LLC?
LLC?
It is. And so it's related to the LLC, which is that if your LLC is not your name, and it's like some other thing, like say, it's like Ratelle Holdings or something. Well, that's like my name. But say, like if I have a forward-facing business name that's like a brand name, say I had like, Meadowood Flowers is my business name. Well, Meadowood Flowers is maybe not, if I have a different LLC name, then I should file a DBA where Ratelle Holdings is doing business as, or DBA as Meadowood Flowers. And so that's why your LLC name doesn't really matter too much. Some people get hung up here and they're like, oh, I want to start my LLC. I want to incorporate, but what should I pick for my name? And I'm like, well, the really only rule is that it can't be the name as another person's LLC in your state. That's all that they're going to check for. It can't be the exact match for somebody because they don't want to be confusing to people. Other than that, it doesn't really matter. It's going to be in your legal documents. No one's really going to see those or care too much about those. But if it's different than what the public knows you as, all you have to do is file a DBA. In some jurisdictions, this is also called a fictitious name filing. And you file that usually in the same place that you file with your LLC, or sometimes it's part of the LLC application. You check a box that says, yep, I'm doing business as, and then the state's like, okay, clear. We just want to make sure if anyone has a problem with Meadowood Flowers, we know the real human being that's behind it, which is you.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So a DBA, think of it as like a bridge, and so we want to have bridges so that we know who's doing who as we're moving out in transacting business in the wider world. So, yeah.
Okay. So you can't have a DBA if you're just a sole proprietor. It has to be LLC related.
You could do one as a sole proprietor, but normally you could say like, I'm doing business as, but it doesn't really, if you're going to file one, you would just file your DBA for what your business name is. So, okay. Yeah. But an LLC can have multiple DBAs. I have some clients who have one, again, like Ratelle Holdings LLC, and there could be 20 different DBAs off of that, of all different kind of businesses that they have. So, yeah.
Okay.
Now, and then maybe it gets to the point where those need to be also different LLCs, and then you can talk to your attorney about structuring and what that looks like, and should some of those be owners in their other businesses, and there's pros and cons to doing that, and also tax consequences usually. So, yeah.
Okay. No, that makes sense. So would that be something then that a tax attorney would help you with, or a CPA, or?
CPA can usually use a CPA, okay. And a business attorney can help you work that out of like, well, here's how we want to do. And some CPAs do. I've had that when I've been working in more of mergers and acquisition work, or starting up when people are coming in and they've already had existing businesses, is they want their other businesses and existing LLCs to be the owners of their ownership in this new like 50-50 partnership. That's pretty common because it makes it easier for the money to go through there tax wise. So yeah.
Okay. No, that's super helpful. I think a lot of people feel like when they're doing something new, because I've done this myself. I have a couple of LLCs, or maybe I didn't need to. I could have just done a DBA because it was just a slightly different branch of what I'm doing. Like I created a different LLC for some of my like online stuff, like my courses and whatnot, but that's still ultimately related to Catalyst Consulting. It's just a slightly different branch of it. So it's not like a whole, like I could have just done a DBA.
Right. I mean, there's pros and cons to keeping things together in the LLC. And this is another really common question I get is like, well, should I keep it together or should I separate it? The pro of keeping things together is that it's less admin work and bookkeeping because you can put everything together. And so they can share resources. So if you have businesses that are like sharing the same contractor, like if they share a VA, if they're using the same software and other expenses and stuff, then maybe it makes sense to keep them together. But the con would be their liability is now linked. And so if you have different businesses with very different risk categories, like if you have an Etsy shop that does, birthday party prints, and then you have a women's bachelorette rock climbing business, I would not put those in the same LLC because those are very different risk categories.
Somebody might die on one of them.
Yeah. The rock climbing is like, that should be its own siloed thing, and we should be waiving the heck out of everybody. Yes, all the insurance. Yeah.
That's funny. No, that's a great explanation of it too. Like that helps it make sense, I think, at least for me anyway. Yeah. So perfect. So what, as a business owner, what advice would you give to people when it comes to their businesses?
Yeah, I mean, outside of kind of the LLCs and the business foundation, kind of the next bucket that I say is really important to work on is getting things in writing. So usually we're talking about contracts. And the reason why here is not because contracts are so fun and sexy and this is how people want to spend their adult lives. They're not. And I'm self-aware enough, even as an attorney, I could admit that. But the reason why it's really helpful to get things in writing is that usually working through a contract forces you to think of scenarios that you wouldn't otherwise. And it forces you to kind of go into more of that complex thinking of, well, what if this happens? How are we going to handle that? And unfortunately, unless you've been in that position and seen some of the bad stuff that can happen or the unexplained or what happens when like a pandemic hits, how are we going to handle that? Then it leaves a lot up in the air, and then there can be misunderstandings. Because that's the other thing is our human brains, they're not computers. And so they don't remember things always in a very, in as clear a way as we'd like them to. So people's understandings of conversations can be different. That's why two people can see the same accident and they literally can believe different things about what they saw wholeheartedly, which is why two people in business can remember a conversation of like, well, no, we talked about this and this was going to be the bid and you were going to do this and it was going to take this long and this much. And then the job gets done and then an invoice gets sent and then, now we have problems. So that's why contracts are really great. So the most important thing there is to protect your revenue stream. So however your main way is that you are making money, it really should be protected by a contract. So this means if you are providing one-on-one client services, have a client service agreement and make sure it's really comprehensive and really detailed on the scope. That's where I see the biggest issue about conflicts is scope of work. Because if you are a graphic designer or an interior designer or, a builder or something, it's going to be about, okay, how do we handle changes? How many changes do you get? And do you get charged more for changes? Do you have to sign on each change order or whatnot? And then if people go and this project takes longer or is more expensive, whose problem is that? And what if it was the client was slow on getting their homework back to you and now it's delayed because we didn't order the things when we needed to? Well, sometimes people blame the service provider, but it's also the clients also has some responsibility there. So that's usually really important there. The other agreement that I always say is really important is that if you are in business with someone, it's a really, really good idea to have an operating agreement, or they're also called founders agreements or partnership agreements. They're all used interchangeably. But this is basically the document that governs how are you going to run your business. And it's really critical to lay out how you're going to be working with each other, because it's basically like your business prenup. And if you don't have a good business prenup, you're basically signing yourself up for an ugly business divorce a lot of the time.
Because that's actually what I've called it before.
Because it's your business prenup, because things change, life changes, and expectations change, and we really need to have a good conversation while we're in the honeymoon, while things are awesome and there's excitement and yeah, we're going to do business together. Wonderful. Love it. Let's talk about all this cool stuff that we're going to build for the business. This, intellectual property, these podcast episodes or these ebooks or these blog posts or this email list we're building. Who owns that? Do you own that? Do I own that? Does the business own that? Can we take that with us when we leave? What if somebody wants to get out of the business? What is that going to look like? Do they get bought out? How are we going to decide how much is fair? Can they start up a similar business with all that they've learned and all the resources from this? These are all really good conversations to have sooner rather than later. So I like to, advise people, have a slightly awkward conversation now and avoid a very expensive and, dumpster fire, even like going to like litigation later, which is where these disputes gone. And I've had to be involved with this when clients have come to me later in their, in their evolution of their business. Especially it's really, really painful when it's a family held business or when these are close friends. Like these are people who had a relationship before they went and worked with each other in business. And now that relationship is just totally kaput. So if you care about that relationship, please get stuff in writing and work through that. I actually have a podcast episode that has a free little partnership handout that comes with it that talks all about like my number one tips for partnerships. And it walks you through everything from like vision boarding and kumbayaing together to make sure you're on the same page to like legal and technical partnership splits and voting rights and valuations and how that all works. So it's episode 45 of Creative Counsel podcast. So
nice. No, that's cool. Yeah. So what resources do you wish that you had known about at the beginning of your entrepreneurship journey?
I wish that I had known. I tried to do a lot of digging online, but I wish that I had known and could have found earlier some other attorneys who kind of did what I did or were kind of in this path. I've since found them now, but it took a while to kind of find them. And there's not a whole lot of us in terms of who kind of have a kind of non-traditional practice, and we work virtually, and we're online, and we're not afraid to just talk and help people as much as possible. And we're not so scared that like, oh well, everyone's going to think that I'm their attorney, so I can't give any legal advice. Like there's a lot of ethical considerations there, which I can appreciate. But what it means is that like people aren't getting basic things answered, and that it all seems really confusing and convoluted, and they're not being discussed in a way that's actually helpful to them. Attorneys talk like they're talking to other attorneys instead of like they're actually talking to business owners. So, and they're not explaining things in the way they need to be. So yeah, I wish I would have had, someone there or like kind of, a mentor that could have helped me. I think mentors are really helpful. I think masterminds and investing in coaching is really helpful for your business. And I've seen clients time and time again who invest in that and who realize quickly on what it is they like to do in their business and what they're not and what's outside their zone of genius, and understand that they're going to find those resources that they're happier, sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
Yeah.
So tell us how we can best support you. What are you working on? Can we help spread the word for you about anything?
Yeah. In terms of, I'm pretty active on Instagram, so I love to have people, connect with me there. And that's always fun to talk to entrepreneurs. And I do a fair amount of like free legal lives. I'll just hop on there and make myself available to people. And then in terms of next steps, I do offer my templates, and then I still take on clients for one-on-one services. My roster spaces are narrowing because I have clients that are working on more and more projects, which is, a good problem to have. It also makes me sad sometimes when I don't have room for everyone that I'd like to serve, but that's why I'm working and putting more effort into some of my digital resources that can help people. And so that's an area where I haven't launched an online course yet, but I've got like 2 outlined, and I just need to buckle down and get them recorded and get them out there so that I can help businesses who do find themselves overwhelmed when they start getting on Google or getting in the midst of Facebook groups, and they're getting really, conflicting advice and wondering like, well, what am I supposed to do? And I think the worst possible thing is that people start to feel so overwhelmed with it that they don't do anything, or even like worst possible is they don't even move forward with business because they're like, oh, well, I don't know what to do next, or this is all so scary. You get clarity through action. And I think there's a healthy spot to put legal stuff, which is that we shouldn't be all in a camp of like, everything has to be dialed in. I have to make sure everything's in order before I move forward at all. Like you got to be okay with a little bit of risk and the unknown being an entrepreneur, but then I have some clients who are like bull in a china shop who are like, let's go, let's launch it, let's do the thing. Yeah. And I don't hear about things until after, and then I'm like, I would prefer to be more like a chiropractor than an ER doctor. So
Yeah.
if we can go on like more of the wellness plan, if we could be taking our vitamins and let's do some checks on our website and our social media posts and make sure things in order, that's, better sooner rather than later. So yeah, that's, kind of big picture stuff that I'm working on. And so if people want to connect with me on Instagram, that's the best way to find out, what am I offering next and how can I help people as they're trying to build their own businesses.
Perfect. Yeah, that was the next thing I was going to ask you is the best way to get in touch with you. Because I think I follow you on Instagram. That's where you're the most active, right? I mean, you have a Facebook page too, but you don't have as many.
I don't do much on Facebook, honestly. Yeah, but Instagram is my jam. That's where my people are. And so, and then I've just started experimenting and being on Clubhouse, it's super addicting.
Too, yeah.
But
yeah, same.
So yeah. I love Clubhouse, but I'm trying to figure out what's the best way and how much time do I have to dedicate to that and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I love connecting with people, and it's just my name on Instagram, so it's easy to find me. Look for the pink photo, pink attorney. That's me.
Perfect. Well, excellent. That was all the questions I had for you. Did you have anything else you needed to add?
No, I mean, I think we talked about most things. Oh, I did want to, mention, the other probably most common question I actually get, and it's all about the intersection of accounting stuff, is about when should I incorporate as an SCorp? And I do get that question a lot. And so, and I will just touch briefly that a lot of this question is you need to ask your accountant because it isn't a purely kind of accounting question. Because an SCorp is basically you stay as an LLC, but you get taxed as a corporation. So it's actually not an entity, it's a tax election. It's kind of like a hybrid. So that's an option once you're already an LLC. And normally I've seen most businesses, it makes sense to make that jump once they're making what's called like a reasonable salary from your business and profit. So that's usually around like $50,000 or $60,000 a year. Depends on what you do. So because basically what you'll be doing is now splitting and you'll be putting yourself on payroll, and that's going to be taxed differently than what the general profits are from your business. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. That's good information.
That kind of makes sense. But it's good to keep an eye on that way. If you start having a killer quarter or you have some launch and you're like, oh my gosh, I just made a ton of money, check in with your accountant because they might not know that. And so, and make sure like, hey, should we switch? Is it time to make that switch? And that way, help save you some money on taxes. I've had clients who got behind on that and then they got stuck with overpaying, which is, we don't like to give Uncle Sam any more than we have to, and fit the bottom line there. So, yeah. And then I'm always going to mention kind of the last bucket that I help people with briefly is kind of that intellectual property, which is trademarks and copyrights. And so, and these are kind of the tools that we use to protect our stuff that we create in our business. And copyright is for, your creative works. This is for your actual creations, like, your books and songs, original artwork, ebooks, handouts, workbooks, all journals, all that kind of stuff. And then trademark protects your brand elements. And so that's like the name of your brand, your slogan, your logo, or sometimes like product names. I have a lot of clients now who are trademarking their online courses or like their online coaching programs, especially if they're more of a brand name instead of really descriptive of what they do. I will say that's kind of my biggest misconception that people have in trademarks is they come to me and they're like, hey, I want to trademark the teacher business course. And I'm like, that is really good at describing what it is. That's probably good for SEO and good for marketing ability, but it's not going to be trademarkable because it's too descriptive of what it is. You can't trademark the pizza shop if you have a pizza restaurant. So the best trademarks are actually made up words. And that's why you find all like the drug companies and the Cymbalta and the Lumestra and whatnot and software companies who play that game. The second strongest trademarks are real words, but they don't have anything to do with your selling. Think Apple computers. And then kind of the bronze level of trademarks are things that are suggestive. Think like Sprint for telecommunications. It's fast, it makes you think about it, but it doesn't come out quite right and say what it is. And so as you're thinking about naming things, the other resource I'll say is Hello, My Name is Awesome is a book I recommend to a lot of my clients. It's all about naming your business and things to think about in terms of spelling and making sure that it's not like something inappropriate and something that people can find and can reference to a friend and whatnot. It's written by a person who's a naming consultant. And then she throws in and has a little bit of that legal lens on there as well. But if people who are like looking and still in that ideation stage of picking out names for their things and their business and their brands and products, that's a good resource. So, and it's a whole lot less than hiring her.
Excellent. No, that's great.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
naming, people get stressed out about that. I was helping somebody with that not too long ago, and they're like, "Oh, but what if it's the wrong name?" I was like, "I mean, you'll be fine." Pick
Yeah,
something.
I mean, and that's the thing. Like people, a name starts to be cool because of the business. It's
Yeah.
like the name never makes or breaks it. Now, I think a name should hopefully be like thoughtful, and it should hopefully, and that's why I help in the beginning of like, let's make sure that we have a clear landscape that you can grow in this business to what you want to do, and that we don't immediately have roadblocks because there are existing trademarks in things that you want to sell or that you might next want to sell. And so if you have big dreams, which is awesome, please make sure you talk to someone who can do a trademark clearance search sooner rather than later. Even if you're not ready to register yet, at least do a search and know what the landscape looks like so you know where your green lights and your red lights are. So,
Okay. Very cool. Well, thank you for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. And I think this is going to be a good episode for people because a lot of these questions I get asked, I'm like, I don't know. Ask Brittany. So,
ask me. You can send them my way. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. But yeah, thanks for being here. It was really great and I appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, it was great chatting with you. So yeah, and let me know if there's anything else I can do to help you and help your audience in the small business journey. So I think it's I call, being an entrepreneur, I think is like the greatest personal development course. And so I think, my parting advice would be to just know that there are going to be highs and lows. That's part of the process. And that your goal in being an entrepreneur and a business owner is not to get rid of problems. In fact, you will always have problems. But the goal is to have more interesting and different problems than you did before. And that's how you're going to go up in that spiral, and you're going to grow in your capacity and your skills and what you see and how you're going to solve problems. And that's going to be rewarding to you and hopefully rewarding to the people that you serve. So
that's great. Yeah, thanks. Well, have a great rest of your day. I'm sure I will talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Hey.